옥정고 2학년 1학기 기말 4, 3월 34번.
Such artificial pause fillers as machine-generated supplements for silence may help to produce a more natural-sounding cadence in machine-generated speech patterns and so help to convince the AI's human interlocutors that they are engaging with another human. AI's humanity of silence emerges in these contexts not least because a short period of silence is likely to be interpreted as a pause for thought, therefore reinforcing the illusion that the machine is thinking before responding, just as a human might. However, the technical issues flagged in AI's poor handling of higher duration and frequency silences, no less than the machine inference that silence can be filled with relevant sounds in some conversational situations, are both significant. In this context at least, the AI may be starting to recognize silence not as an absence but as meaningful data. Yet the AI's confusion when presented with substantial silences, and its understanding that short break tags are equivalent to vocal markers such as us and ahs, indicate the AI's continuing preferences for sound over silence, for presence over absence.
3월 35번.
Standardization of information was an effect of printing, since it allowed exact reproduction of information in a way that manuscript copying did not. This is evident in the contrast between the travel logs of Marco Polo and those of Christopher Columbus. After his return from China in 1295, a century and a half before printing, Polo's narrative was copied in about 150 different manuscripts, with so many differences that we're not sure which version is authentic. In contrast, there is only one version of Christopher Columbus's letters about the exploration of the Caribbean in the 1490s, since they were fixed in printed form and widely distributed at the time they were written, so the certainty of accuracy was a way that printing was an improvement over the old oral manuscript culture.
3월 36번.
Archaeological evidence suggests that various crops were being cultivated as early as 9500 BC in the Levant. Over the millennia, continuous innovations have boosted agricultural productivity while reducing manual labor. However, the growing global population will always demand more food. It is projected that by 2050, the world's population will increase to 9.7 billion, which will require global food production to rise by at least 70% to meet demand. Despite this need, only a small portion of the Earth's surface is suitable for farming due to limitations such as climate, topography, soil quality, and technology. Political and economic factors, including land ownership patterns, environmental laws, and population density, also influence agricultural land use. In fact, the amount of land used for agriculture has been declining. In 2013, around 18.6 million square miles was used for food production, compared to 19.5 million square miles in 1991.
3월 38번.
There are several ways that participants in a make-believe can communicate things about the fictional world to other participants. Sometimes these messages are emitted naturally as a result of full participation in the fictional world, i.e., something said or done by a player while in character communicates some things that are fictional of that world. These in-character behaviors can be insufficient, however, to maintain the necessary amount of common ground about what is fictional in the world of the make-believe. For example, a child pretending to be Peter Pan might gasp and draw a plastic knife. This might be sufficient to communicate that fictionally one of Peter's enemies, such as Captain Hook, is approaching. At these times, participants often come at least partly out of character to give other participants the information they need. For example, it would be important to avoid confusion about who is playing which character. No, you're Captain Hook, and I'm Peter Pan.
3월 40번.
When self-experimentation and conventional experiments are both possible, the difference between them often resembles the difference between learning and showing. Self-experiments are better for discovery but worse for convincing others that the solution is helpful or the answer is correct. Of course, most scientists want to do both. Discover something and convince others of their discovery. Thus, psychologists should consider doing both self-experiments and conventional ones. The best use of resources may often be self-experiments followed by conventional ones. The researcher begins with self-experiments that, if all goes well, find large effects and/or generate and eliminate many hypotheses. This exploratory and theory-building phase lasts until a convenient solution or large effect is found. Then the researcher uses self-experiments to find the procedural parameters, e.g., duration, time of day, intensity, that optimize the solution or maximize the effect. Only then would the researcher begin conventional experiments, using the optimized parameters.